Hey there, and welcome back to another My Hero Academia Season 6 review. And today we're going to be talking about the latest episode to drop, episode 16, the Hellish Todoroki Family, Part 2. Which, well, I guess you'd assume that this episode would pretty much entirely revolve around Endeavour and his family. But in actuality, it's far more a Hawks-centered episode, so I guess we can consider Hawks as informally adopted from this point on. And yeah, this is actually a really heavy episode with a lot of Hawks' backstory. It's pretty bleak and depressing, but really good nonetheless. But yeah, before we go any further than this, I would like to say that I have read the manga, and I'm aware of any relevant future plot points and details, but for the purpose of these reviews, I prefer to approach things from a more anime-only perspective, so that anime-only fans can watch along and join in too. Although that being said, it has been a while, and I will have forgotten some things. But yeah, with all that being said, let's jump into the episode. So we start off the episode just with a brief recap of Bakugo waking up from his coma, learning that basically everybody was fine, except for Deku, and then trying to storm his way towards his room, probably to yell at his comatose body. It doesn't really tie in with the rest of the episode, but it keeps that plot point fresh in the audience's mind to set up for some continuation a little bit down the line. And then the intro plays, and we get into the episode properly. We start off with a look at Hawks, who, like every single hero in the history of the show, seems to have grown up watching All Might kick ass on TV. God, never really thought about it, but All Might must be a cultural institution. He'd surely be going down as perhaps the most famous Japanese person ever in this world. I'm not sure about his worldwide reach, but he'd also probably be mega famous internationally. I mean, didn't he basically solve major crime during his tenure as a hero and pretty much became the prototype for a new generation of heroes? They all follow his blueprint, and almost all of them cite him as their inspiration. And I like that they sort of touch on this with this scene. That he's such an icon, but because of that, he kind of feels distant, like he couldn't possibly be a real person. And so to kids like Hawks who have hard lives and feel little hope, he's pretty much just a character in a TV show. All heroes are. Same with Endeavour. After all, he sees him take down a villain on live TV, but it doesn't change things for him. He's still disconnected from everything. We then see his home life, and we see he has a paranoid and abusive criminal dad who hits him and threatens him regularly. His mum's not mentally sound. And he gets accused of trying to sell out his dad, beaten for turning his back, forced to stay inside the home at all times. You know, pretty much a nightmare scenario. They live in squalor, and his parents seem to despise him and wish that he hadn't been born. So that's lovely. It honestly feels like the origin story of a serial killer. And luckily, that's not what happens, but still, it's true. And I think it also serves as an interesting parallel to Shigaraki. They both had crap home lives. They both had abusive dads and mums that wouldn't stand up for them. But Hawks uses this to propel him to do good deeds and not end up like his father, whereas Shigaraki snaps and murders his entire family. It really feels like they're trying to push the idea that being abused does not mean you're just going to go mad and violent and slaughter innocents. It's the same deal with Shoto and Darby. After their experiences with their father, Toya becomes Darby, whereas Shoto strives to be better, to show that his dad that he doesn't need him. And, I just find this quite interesting. Hawks then recounts the moment that everything changed for him. His father was arrested for stealing a car, arrested by Endeavour, which in turn gave Hawks that spark, that drive, because suddenly, heroes weren't this abstract, disconnected concept. They were real. Endeavour saved him. And I guess this really does explain why Hawks has been so hard on the Endeavour bandwagon. He's his personal hero. But anyway, he and his mum run away, and she tells him that he's useless and questions why he was born, and then she tells him to get the money by any means necessary. How wholesome. But yeah, he does what he's told, and he goes out and becomes a hero, saving a bunch of people from a massive car accident using his quirk. And this in turn attracts the attention of the Hero Commission, who offers his mum a new life, a new home. All expenses paid, so long as she gives him up and cuts all ties with him. And not surprisingly, they both choose to accept, and Hawks the hero is born. And honestly, this whole opening segment, deeply sad. But at the same time, it also just adds so much depth to Hawks as a character. For one of the newest main characters to be introduced, the dude has development for days. We then cut back to the present, where Hawks and Best Jeanist are out in the city, patrolling. And Hawks, he ain't looking too good. He has a full bodysuit, bandages, a mask and voice modulator. Phew, Darby really took him to school, eh? We then have a brief bit of dialogue that explains how they managed to pull off the Best Jeanist reveal. Turns out that the same tech that they used to save Hawks after he got Darbied had earlier been put to work on Best Jeanist to put him into a state of fake death, which in turn convinced Darby that he was actually dead and got him hooked up into a tube for his body to be no mood later on, only to be released by Hawks at a convenient moment. Although, that being said, he has been severely weakened by the process, and he still isn't at 100%. Between this, the big battle, and All for One blasting a hole in his chest in Camino, dude's had a rough year. Also, how fast is Hawks typing on his speaking device? Whew, spitting out speeches. The pair then notice a bunch of F-list villains, and Genis goes full Batman and subdues them just using his car gadgets. And despite many of the public celebrating his arrival, we see that not everything's going that well. The heroes of the district and the cops have all cleared out. The cops are hunting escaped convicts, and many of the heroes have simply closed up shop and left. And this in turn has created a lot of discontent and a lot of distrust, which is exactly what the villains wanted. They wanted anarchy. They wanted a loss of faith in the system. Hawks and Genis then continue on their way over to the house that Hawks' mother lives in, and they find it abandoned, with a note confessing that she told the villains about him when they came and threatened her, whilst also expressing regret at how she treated him and pride at what he's become. And yeah, in my eyes, a little too late. But sure. Anyway, instead of being mad, Hawks kind of feels guilty, it seems, because he thinks he abandoned her and thus he turned away from his ideal of saving everybody. Therefore, he thinks it was kind of like karma. He then talks about how now with her gone and the commission all but destroyed, there's nothing tying him down. He can be his own hero. And so, he then takes off his mask for this part, and his voice is all raspy from what Darby did to him. He then goes on to think about how the Endeavour doll he had as a kid was bought for him by his mum as a way to shut him up about going outside, whilst also just being the more affordable option than the expensive All Might toy, which, bad luck Endeavour, toys are in the bargain bin. And so, he tells Genis that when a person's free, or backed into a corner, their true nature's revealed. Hence why he thinks that Twice was ultimately, at the end of his life, a good person. His actions might have been evil or bad, but they were born of loyalty and love. And that's what Hawks wants to emulate. And he's going to start by facing his origin story, Endeavour. And so he's going to inject himself into some family drama. Oh, I'm really loving the Hawks storyline. He's consistently been the coolest character in the show since he was introduced. We then have a quick reminder that Japan's going to shit, as we see Wash turn up at the scene of a huge battle where villains went up against citizens trying to get their own justice. And it's just carnage. And despite these people yelling about how they don't need heroes to protect them, they then complain and throw shit at Wash for having the audacity to have not arrived in time. Ugh, poor Wash just trying to do his thing. I mean, I get why they're mad, but I also get a bit heated at this scene. I just feel bad for him. Because meanwhile, a bunch of actual hack heroes, like the number 9 hero, decide to retire or quit because this has suddenly gotten too real for them. Back when All Might was around, they only had to fight the lower tier villains. But now he's gone, and suddenly, it's more dangerous, so they quit. Honestly, Stain was right about these people. Bunch of fakes. Anyway, Hawks reflects on all of this chaos, and laments that it's all being blamed on Endeavour. And yeah, fair enough, it isn't really all his fault. Darby, yes, but everything else? Hardly. The world just needs a scapegoat, I guess. Which is when we finally get some Todoroki Family. Dr. Toad tells Endeavour that everybody's okay, and gives his usual spiel about how he's lucky to be alive, etc., before telling him that he believes in him, that he's rooting for him. It's nice to see that somebody doesn't blame Endeavour for every problem in hero society. Although yeah, I very much doubt he's going to be winning any Father or Husband of the Year awards anytime soon. He then starts reflecting on Toya and how he couldn't fight him. He simply froze like when Natsuo was in danger. And that even though the country needs him to fight, he feels like he can't because Toya's ultimately his son and the culmination of all of his mistakes. And so he says that even if he survives, the hero Endeavour has ultimately died, which, yeah, very much feels like the opposite of what Hawks said earlier. Whilst Hawks' mistakes have led to him feeling a sense of freedom and being able to make his own way in the world, Endeavour feels crippled by his, which I found to be a very interesting narrative contrast. Anyway, his kids come in, he breaks down crying and apologising, and then his wife comes in and talks about how she and the kids have far more guilt and regret than he does. And it's like, uh-oh. We absolving the abuser? She's even holding the flower. And it's like, surely not, right? It's literally his fault. How can they be more guilty than him? But sure. She tells him that she wants to talk about their family and about Toya as the episode ends. Whew. Ends right before the big family showdown. Like, come on. Feels like this episode title was a little bit of false advertising. But yeah, sure, that's okay. The preview promises a bit more, and the backstory of Toya and his fall into villainy. So yeah, that's going to be one of the biggest episodes yet in terms of Todoroki Family drama. I live for this stuff. And so yeah, that's the end of the episode and the end of the video. And I would like to remind you that these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the episode? You like it, hate it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and let me know.